Welcome to the Source One podcast. Consider us your source for all things procurement, supply management, and strategic sourcing, anytime, anywhere. In the final days of 2016, Source One Director Dave Pastore reflected on the year in telecommunications sourcing. 3 emerging trends stood out. Increasingly popular with companies of all sizes, these areas promise to gain even more momentum in 2017. The adoption of software-defined networking technologies, carrier cloud connected services, and managed security services. 12 months later, Dave now joins us to discuss how those predictions panned out and provide a forecast for telecom procurement in the coming year. So Dave, last year you mentioned we tend to hear about new developments in telecom for a long time before we see them practically applied. Did 2017 meet your expectations for practical applications of those 3 emerging systems?
It did. In fact, in many ways it exceeded expectations. In the past, adoption of emerging technologies in the telecom space tended to have a much longer ramp period, but in areas like SD-WAN and cloud-connected services, as well as managed security, the take-up's been much more rapid.
Were there any industries in particular that met, exceeded, or failed to meet your expectations?
Well, we've got clients in a wide variety of industries, from financial services to retail to high-tech and so on. And my previous statement holds true that across the board, there's a lot of interest in what's going on in the marketplace. And so many organizations are looking for insight into how they can better support their business with new technologies and service offerings that are being made available.
In 2016, most of SourceOne's clients leveraged SD-WAN technology as a backup or to cover low priority areas at minimum. How have SD-WAN technologies evolved?
Well, the evolution of SD-WAN has been pretty interesting in that it brought many small new players, many of whom had already been gobbled up within this last year by the 800-pound gorillas like Cisco buying Viptela and VMware buying VeloCloud. Meanwhile, the carriers have their own offerings, in many cases through partnerships with some of these same players. Really, things are moving at breakneck speed, so as everyone's clamoring to try to get the edge on the competition and become that behemoth clear market leader in the space, it introduces some challenges for organizations that are truly looking to qualify the service offerings because as things are moving at such a rapid pace, the quality and completeness of those service offerings can be questionable.
Has the rapidly changing market caused clients to consider SD-WAN any differently than other technologies?
I think it's definitely a factor. There's an interesting balance between the general interest in new technology, which, like I said, often moves a bit more slowly, and a keen awareness that things are still a bit volatile, and so it's prudent for companies to proceed with caution.
Switching gears to cloud-connected services, have carriers made it any easier to establish connections with companies?
They definitely have. Carriers started a few years ago with some of the heavy hitters like Salesforce and AWS. I'm not really sure if they were testing the waters at the time to see if the service offering would sell or if they were going with some of the obvious companies as a proof of concept to get the other providers on board. I would guess it's mostly the former, but the latter probably factored into things for some of the providers that are connected to carriers' networks today.
What's next for companies who've integrated cloud services into their WAN?
The most interesting thing to me about this trend has been that within just the past few years, many had speculated that network connectivity is just getting dumber. All people care about is big pipes that connect point A to point B so that they can operate their applications and transmit data. Now, with cloud-connected services, not to mention SD-WAN and managed security, the conversation's changed quite a bit. Networks are now enabling business in a different way than just providing pure bandwidth. So in terms of what's next, I think we'll continue to see trends of carriers layering additional third-party services as well as native services into their offerings in order to further enable technology and fulfill even more complex business requirements. VMware throwing their hat into the ring on SD-WAN is evidence of that, I would say.
In your opinion, do companies seem willing or able to invest in the necessary cybersecurity services?
For the most part, yes. It's been an increasing priority. So, for example, in banking, regulation requires it, and in other industries like healthcare, insurance, and pharma, security is critical due to the sensitive nature of the data that these companies deal with. In retail as well, companies are extremely wary of becoming the next news story about a breach. So, security will continue to be a trend in our increasingly connected world, In fact, I saw a statistic recently that said there would be a global shortage of 2 million IT security jobs in 2019. So that gives you an idea of where security trends are heading.
And what new threats have emerged in the last year?
Well, I'm not a security expert, but based on just this discussion alone, we're talking about potentially introducing more physical connections to the outside world and some SD-WAN configurations. Also, we haven't talked about it, but even the shift from traditional voice communications to voice over IP and SIP introduces new security challenges. So I would say in general, like we said, there's an increasingly interconnectedness in today's technology world, and that introduces a lot more complexity, and with that complexity, new vulnerabilities that can often be overlooked and subsequently exploited. That's why many organizations are looking to stay ahead of the curve and are being proactive about ensuring security. So they're looking to find problems before someone else does.
How do you predict providers will win over companies who have previously resisted investing in security solutions?
I'll be interested to see how that plays out. On one hand, many organizations are bolstering their own internal capabilities, but on the other hand, deep expertise that third-party firms can bring is often difficult or impossible to develop and maintain in the vacuum of today's enterprises. I really do think that companies will continue to identify a need at some level to bring expertise, at least as an enhancement of their own internal capabilities. Companies who do not would be the exception rather than the rule. So I would say that it's less a question of the market winning over organizations and more a question of organizations identifying an imperative to have best-in-class security.
Are there just going to be some companies who won't invest until they've suffered a serious breach?
There always are.
Do you predict these trends will continue to gain momentum in 2018?
Absolutely. We're just getting started, and I think 2018 will be an interesting year. These trends are going to continue to pick up momentum and speed.
What surprising trends did you observe throughout 2017?
Well, beyond what we've already discussed, I would say that the pace of the adoption has been the biggest surprise. It's quite a shift from the previous decade or so of technology adoption in the networking space.
And what trends do you see emerging in the new year?
You'll have to read my new blog to find that out.
Okay. Thank you so much, Dave.
Thanks. It's been a real pleasure.
You've been listening to the Source One podcast. To learn more about emerging procurement trends, check out our blog, The Strategic Sorcerer. Want to provide feedback or suggest a topic for a future episode? Let us know at prrequest@sourceoneinc.com. Thanks for